Charles, it's hard to know how long this has been going on, but it seems like something pretty crazy is going on.
For quite a long time, sad to say. Sad to say. And it really is, first of all, I mean, the art and music departments have now gotten such capabilities that are world-class capabilities. This is a real tour de force. And we're making light of what is really a very serious subject. You take the youthful innocence of a child, you take that away from a young person, as Epstein and his accomplices have done, both perhaps accomplices who are straight up crooks, and others who may be actually working in governments around the world, in this country and around the world, who decided that the Epstein caper, Epstein criminal enterprise, was something that they could monitor and monetize for themselves and potentially use to blackmail the various people who got involved in it. So we're going to make light of what is a very serious subject, because sometimes that's the best way to talk about serious subjects. I mean, you can't just, I wouldn't be a very good doctor, if you walk into a patient and said, yeah, you've got 15 minutes until you're dead. You want a Coke?
You got to pay the bill.
Right, exactly. Pay that bill before you die, please. Yeah. I take American Express. But seriously, this is, we have the mainstream media falling all over itself, first to sell a Russian hoax conspiracy for 2 years. This sex trafficking, child sex trafficking and slavery, it seems to have flourished, in particular under, I would say it was accelerated on January 20th, 2009, when the incompetent Hillary Clinton Obama foreign policy promoted regime change and instability even more aggressively across the world, creating refugee streams and vulnerable people, and can't blame them for, and I won't blame them for earthquakes and hurricanes, stuff like that, but there's a fair amount all the time of displaced people who are vulnerable, and it seems like some of these wretched creeps, Epstein and others, look at that and they say, this is fantastic. We'll get aid money and we'll give it to some crooked foundation, and we'll have our pick of the best looking young boys and girls, and they're refugees anyway, and so who cares about that? They could just as easily have been dead. And the very places, when you think about government and you say, should we be more on the side that I think perhaps, Jason, you and I are on, of you start with self-government. You don't expect government to do everything for you. You do what you can do about your own life and get it right, and hope that you don't have to rely on government.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, on the other hand, you have the Clintons and the Obamas and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Chief Nitwit and Kamala and those people who, they're not satisfied that we're spending $6.5 trillion a year in America on government at federal, state, and local levels all combined. So they want to take more of your money, take most of your wealth, and generally make your lives miserable, saying that they're going to use this money and this wealth for the benefit of vulnerable people, when we have this case study. From 1988 forward, with the advent of globalism, in this case study here with...
Well, yeah, I wanted to bring this up because it's not new, Charles, but it is new that it's being paid this much attention to. I don't know if people remember this, but this was, Paul Bonacci and all these guys who were tied up in the Franklin scandal. And I mean, this is pretty serious evidence, right? We've got a credit card receipt here and allegations of young, they always call it prostitution, but I have a feeling these are slaves.
Right. Right, and you get right into it. I mean, when I went through the great pleasure of raising 2 children, and towards the end of the period as basically a lead single parent, and I had all the help that a human being could want, and many crutches, let's just say, in trying to get that done, and it wasn't all that easy. Maybe just because I'm an incompetent father, but taking care of children is difficult, especially in this day and age where today in 2019, where very young children have access to the internet and cell phones and all kinds of stuff, and their peers are all You know,
get into a lot of trouble with that.
especially if you're in a big city or a private school or something like that. So when you think about the places where government should in theory be able to help the most with very young kids and or children above the age of below the age of 18 and senior people, and those are precisely the areas where our government is doing a piss poor job, both in education of the young and in taking care of the elderly. And yet we're spending $6.5 trillion on it at a time where you can create this Crowdsource the Truth network with a comparatively small investment to what it would have cost in 1988 to try to do this, if you could have done it.
You couldn't have done it. I mean, it's a comparatively small investment compared to even 10 years ago. All these live streaming and portable phone camera technologies are, just a couple of years old.
Yeah. So when we think about the cavalier way in which these know-it-all mainstream media people have failed, frankly, to get to the bottom of these child sex trafficking and slavery scandals, that in the modern age, so many years after the United States outlawed slavery in 1865, we're back in the same place where people who are vulnerable, who don't get the education they need, whose families break apart, they end up either getting trafficked or leading lives of misery or becoming homeless. This particular story you're referring to was back August 1st, 1989. I don't think that has ever really been investigated the degree to which it needs to be investigated.
Well, HW is dead, so they investigated all they want, and so is Ronald Reagan. I mean, all the key people are dead, so it's not that.
Well, but the cautionary tale that when when you're talking about children as they go into puberty in that period, that's a very tough period for kids. They're growing up, they're thinking adult thoughts, and they're in 12 and 13 and 14-year-old bodies, and and they're prone to rebel against authority. And the last thing you want to see is a government-financed effort to traffic in young kids in Haiti, let's say, or across Africa and the Middle East, as I suspect has been happening and will continue to happen until we make an example of this, excuse my language, fucker.
Yeah.
His life story, Epstein's life story, we need to understand exactly, how his life evolved from the moment he was born through his high school days, college, how he evaded the draft in Vietnam, the whole thing. We've got to understand all that. And who are the people who got him into this life? He didn't just come up with this himself. He didn't just get all this, the trappings of wealth himself. This is part of a wider plot. It suited people to have Epstein do this. Well, who were those people? Who were the puppeteers behind Epstein? One obvious choice to investigate is, of course, Bill Clinton, who can't seem to stay away from any kind of trouble of any kind. And I love the way you put Clinton here with Ehud Barak, which you were explaining to me is the guy underneath Epstein. Ehud Barak, people may forget, was the Prime Minister of Israel just in the final moments of Bill Clinton's second term, as Bill Clinton decided to pardon Mark Rich and Pincus Green and other disreputable people. But the Green and Rich pardons were particularly unusual and not merited. I mean, most people who are pardoned ordinarily have agreed to either sign a deferred prosecution agreement and go to jail, or have been tried and convicted and served time in jail. Green and Rich fled the country and never really suffered financially at all. And Bill, broke all kinds of precedent. The story is, in part, at the urging of Ehud Barak, who was claiming that Mark Rich and Pincus Green were doing wonderful things to promote, the security for Israel and the peace in the West and in the Middle East. Okay, so now he's back in the frame again, visiting Epstein, and also back in the frame, Barak is, for possibly being playing a role in the next government in Israel as that gets put together in a coalition. And then you have Dershowitz, who I don't have a link to these stories, but there are multiple links to stories where he is trying to make the argument that, and Epstein was trying to make the argument that it's just, these are man-made laws, but 14-year-olds can give birth.
Who said that?
Dershowitz was trying these arguments on for side.
What?
The argument being that biologically speaking, if a girl is able to give birth to a child, then
you might as well rape her?
No, the biology is not rape her, but biology is saying that there's nothing wrong, in essence, with that child conceiving and giving birth. And that for that kind of an argument, I could understand that argument coming from the crazy lands of the Starbucks I go to on Sunday morning, or the bums outside the Starbucks on Sunday morning. I could hear that. The people are working on their 18th Colt 45 at 7 in the morning.
Works every time, Charles.
Making that argument, but for a distinguished professor, and he really truly is in the legal field a distinguished professor, the author of I don't know how many different books, a guy who's figured in so many controversies for so many different clients, to seriously make that kind of argument. He has children as well, I believe. It's just mind-numbing. I mean, if that's the case, why don't we let 14-year-olds vote?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the thing that comes to my mind is if we're talking about, nature versus laws, why are we throwing people in jail for possession of a plant like marijuana? And, Sean Atwood, who was my guest on Friday, spoke about how he's compiled a list of people who are in prison in the United States for life sentences for marijuana possessions. Totally non-violent crime. I mean, if there's anything that shouldn't be illegal, it's that.
Yeah. So this is a show where we're going to re-examine a bunch of things that have come to light. And again, hats off to both artistic departments and to you.
Well, the sound department, I'm going to put a link to that's a cover of that music. I have no musical ability whatsoever.
Oh, sure. You're being modest.
I don't. I can't carry a tune in a bucket, Charles.
All right.
But with that, I think it's time for us to, should we just mention the playlist before we go to the slides, Charles? People who've been watching for the past 2 years are well aware that we've compiled all of the episodes of Sunday with Charles, as well as Charles Ortel is closing into this handy playlist that people can access on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. And the channel's been growing nicely this past week, up over 83,000 subscribers. So I expect we have a lot of new viewers with us today, over 1,000 people watching right now. And if they want to get caught up, they can spend 350 odd hours watching each episode, and also downloading the slide presentation that comes along with each. You're going to want to click on the video and just come over here in the description and tap that little show more phrase there, and you will see this link, download Charles's presentation. You can just click on that in almost any of the videos, and you're going to have a PDF copy that you can save on your computer and you can examine and go over as you watch the show. And Charles, I think everybody knows that Google has been blacklisting sites like Crowdsource the Truth. Zach Voorhees came forward last week, first with Project Veritas, and then with our friend Michael Moore on True Pundit, talking about how Google is sending around documents internally describing who's blacklisted. So it's really impossible for us to monetize videos that talk about these type of unpopular subjects, and it's critically important for viewers to become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. I can't keep the show going without your sponsorship, so please visit subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. You're going to get access to lots of exclusive content, and it keeps the show going. So that's a good thing for people to do.
Yeah, that's great. So actually on this playlist,
yes,
at the very top of it there's some amazing numbers.
Oh yeah, let me just get back to that, sorry. I know you're a numbers guy, Charles.
Yeah, well, I mean, because people in media ask me, tell me about this Crowdsource the Truth, and at the very top you see, if you go back up to the very top.
This here?
No, the very top. You have 83,425. No. Yeah, that's good. But I want to do the next number, Jason, up here.
Sorry, Charles, I'm not sure which number you're
At
looking
the very
for.
top, just right there.
Ah, there you go.
You-
19,000 views.
19 million views.
Sorry.
19.4 million views. I mean,
I'm
that
all out of sorts.
yeah, I mean, we could tell who the numbers guy is there. Anyway.
I don't even know where the numbers are.
And I don't know how to turn on a computer. But anyway,
So there we go.
So that's a very significant number of viewers from 83,000. That 83,000 subscribers would attract 19.4 million views. And generally speaking, Jason, your videos are not 2 minutes long. I mean, they're 50 minutes, 30 minutes, in my case, 2 hours. And that you've developed, I think, a very nice community of both guests and viewership, and this idea of encouraging the viewership to actually be more than just listeners,
Right.
and instead to help with the process of moving this mammoth struggle forward is really appreciated and a tribute to your vision.
Well, thank you, Charles. When I set out to do this, I was observing basically CNN and the Washington Post and the New York Times, and I said, look, if that's journalism, they're not doing it right. It was the same sort of epiphany that I had when I decided to start inventing 3D cameras. I looked at the state of the art and I said, this is terrible, this is unacceptable. I see a way it could be done better, and I did it. So there's people out there who complain that I'm not a journalist. I'm taking a new approach to journalism. We're applying the power of social media to investigative journalism, and it's working amazingly well. I'm a conduit through which that all happens. I bring people like you and others to the show, and then viewers in the audience can interact with you and the information that you bring forward and help us discover new things. It's happening all the time.
That's great. So with that, why don't we spend just a quick second on the cover slide here. That what we try to do in the format is, with really almost every video we have done this, we try to encapsulate what the video is all about, so that you can quickly decide, do you really want to get into this or not get into it? And sometimes you don't, sometimes you do. But when we think about the root causes of, why would there be a pedophilia rings flourishing, in part, and it's not because I believe in the answers of the progressive wing, but in part, the yackers, the Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and Nitwit Warren and others, who are talking about inequality and all that, they have a point in the sense that with unregulated globalism and with decisions by central banks to lower interest rates and by governments to run deficits, what we've done is we've dramatically inflated asset values around the world. We've created people like Zuckerberg and you name it, come out of nowhere, come out of a college dorm room, and now they're worth, $50 billion, $100 billion. And there are not many of those people, but there are enough of them. And then in contrast to them, you've got the people who, let's say, whose parents aren't poor enough so that they can get real scholarships, and they're not rich enough so that their parents can actually kit them out to go to Yale and Harvard and Princeton. You got this middle crunch who has probably borrowed too much by way of student loans. Too many of them are, are hanging around in the sugar baby sites and stuff like that, in meaningless jobs, worrying about their future, worrying how they're going to, survive, trying to keep up with developments, worried that artificial intelligence and technology are going to, trash their prospects, while at the same time they can just go out and have some pot or get drunk or rave or whatever else, and why work?
Ask AOC to give them money.
Yeah, exactly. So you have this situation, it's a supply and demand situation. There are a limited number of choice employment opportunities. There's an excess of people around the world, not just in America, who will work for far less money than the spoiled college graduate will work. And there are no rules. And there's no international regulator that's going to stop Epstein and Clinton and the various people around Clinton from doing what they've been doing for their entire lives. Maybe there's no regulator. Maybe it's up to a Donald Trump. And
well, we've heard they have this 12-mile club where they go in boats offshore. He's on an island. Is it the U.S.? Is it not the U.S.?
Right.
So they're cognizant of the laws and using lawyerly methods to...
Right. And then you see, Epstein may or may not have been extracted. He may or may not be dead. But then when you get caught, as the Clintons have gotten caught so many different ways, so many different times, you run the clock out, You claim the statute, you have these ornate legal arguments using highly paid lawyers. You delay, witnesses disappear or worse. People on the other end get co-opted or worse. And so when we look at this whole long thing, and we're honest about it, we take off the partisan lens. This is not a Republican Party or a Democrat Party problem. This is a swamp problem, a global swamp rat problem. And anybody who has children or has been around children, should understand that in the category of crimes that are possible, I mean, these are the lowest, among the lowest of the low type of crimes. And people who have aspirations to serve the public should be permanently, imprisoned for participating in and promoting these type of crimes, especially if, as I suspect, we will discover that there are government security agencies, hopefully not our own, but government security agencies that quickly spotted this Epstein fraud, quickly understood the four corners of it, quickly figured out the value of having all these powerful and grasping people potentially under the threat of blackmail, and instead of rounding it up, said, you know what, let's juice it up. We'll get more people who we can blackmail, we'll get more power by just continuing. At that point, you become, in my mind, a co-conspirator with our money, with the US government's money.
But Charles, do we really believe that, look, there's a lot of clear ties between Jeffrey Epstein and Mossad. He's hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father was Robert Maxwell, well known to be affiliated with Mossad. We got Ehud Barak sneaking into his house and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty clear. He seems to be linked to Mossad in some way. Do we really expect that Mossad or any foreign intelligence service could run such an extensive operation in New York City, the U.S. Virgin Islands, New Mexico, and the CIA and the FBI don't know?
Well, you're talking about Brennan and Comey.
People on YouTube have known about this for years. How could the CIA, the NSA, the FBI not know? They must be complicit.
And there's, what do you call it, a limited hangout? I mean, what they do, I think, is with these security agencies, I'm guessing, is you have the official people, maybe they hold the chair of head of the CIA or head of the FBI, but on purpose the whole truth is not told to them, maybe.
Right. Oh, to them?
To them, so that they can plausibly go up, as Comey and Mueller did, before Congress and just answer a question without lying wittingly.
I don't think they're as concerned about that as the average person. I think they're happy to wittingly lie.
Right, all right. Well, but I think in each of these security services, you have the people who are in theory playing by the book, and then you have the cutouts who, are set up in a manner where what they're doing is illegal. Yeah. And, but it's viewed in the interest, quote, of national security that they should be able to get away with this, and so they do it, and then it spirals out of control. Right. Because of the blackmail that results, and you're in on the second you agree to overlook a fraud, you are a co-conspirator. You're committing fraud, and that's what the fraudsters know. So there is a hell of a lot of evidence out there, and more to the point, electronic evidence and other type of evidence, because so much of what we're talking about now is for the period 2002 forward, when the internet really took off. People used it more, they trusted it more, and therefore they put a lot more incriminating information into the internet than maybe they should have, and then ultimately into social media. So there's a hell of a lot of information out there. When people start comparing notes, as I believe they are, it's really going to come. We're one of those, titanic good versus evil, spy versus spy, Mad Magazine moments, where it's come to a point where it's not going to be gray in the end. It's going to be black or white. It's going to be Donald Trump and his team reform the system, or they don't. And considering the path that they don't, you look at this collection of nitwits and the Democratic candidates. Well, one of them, imagine any one of them as president, and this thing doesn't come together. I might sign up for the mission of going to Mars.
Yeah, we got to call Elon Musk, because Canada's not far enough. I just heard, I think a week ago, Mad Magazine has stopped publication.
Jeez.
I heard that. I know that's not...
No, but the point is that happened a long time ago, man.
No, I just heard it a week ago or
That's
something.
my point.
Oh. Sorry, Charles.
With that,
you're very up to the minute, I know.
I know, you're busy. Anyway, with that, let's go to particularly for the new people. Here we try to summarize that we go out and we check information to the extent possible. We try to find multiple sources when we are making working theories or piecing together working theories. But these are our theories. And we're entitled to express our opinions. And we do that based on what we believe is grounded analysis of facts. But we invite you, this is a joint process, a common process, we invite you to go in and look at what we found. And if you think we're wrong, and occasionally we do make mistakes, we're all human, get into contact with me via my site or Twitter. Follow both Jason and me on Twitter. I try to respond to short suggestions, less than 150 words in an email, I can't engage in just idle speculation. I'm very busy doing what I'm doing, but I do appreciate viewer comments, and we've had some fantastic ones. We've had some viewers step up and really take it upon themselves to push regulators and government authorities around the world on this. As with each passing moment, as we find more and more stuff, we realize that the magnitude of this is truly gigantic. I mean, I said back with Liz Wheeler in May of 2016, and we will be having, by the way, Liz Wheeler on the show in 29 minutes or so to talk about her book. But I said back then that I thought the Clinton Foundation Charity Fraud Network was at least 100 billion. That was in 2016, and now I'm up in the trillions. When you think about all the affiliated, the stimulus program, all the affiliated frauds that flourished following the precedent that if the Clintons can do it with their mess, why can't we do it with our mess? And why can't governments do it? So there's a lot of information out there. From time to time we make typos and grammar errors, this happens. But as to substance, we have yet to receive any complaint from the Clinton Foundation, any part of the Clinton Foundation, saying what we're saying is wrong, which I find comforting and actually proper, because there isn't anything wrong with what we're saying. It's absolutely on point. So with that, Jason, we'll try to get this one slide done before Liz joins us.
Sure.
There's a hell of a lot going on. And Trump this morning has slammed the New York Times, and I mean like hard slammed the New York Times, because apparently it's been revealed that there was an institutional decision at the New York Times to say, all right, hoax out, racism in. And now you see that the scripts of all the stories are about Trump's a racist, his supporters are racist, anybody would think about Trump's a racist, the black people working for Trump are racist. I mean, it's just, and honestly, I stopped reading the New York Times. I used to read the New York Times regularly, but I stopped in about 1992, saving myself a large amount of money and also saving myself from the aggravation and possible heart attack I would have had I read the editorial page on a daily basis. But when you think about the New York Times and the grip that it once had on people who consider themselves to be educated back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the market value of this piece of crap is way, way down. The financial performance of the Times is on the floor. I don't know how many times bigger Twitter is than the New York Times, but it's quite a lot bigger. Facebook, of course, is gigantic, and Google even more so compared to the New York Times. And you think about, back in the day, there were some superb writers and gifted investigative journalists who did magnificent work, especially in the magazine and the features.
Not
now
the book reviews so much.
Not the book reviews, but now, I think only a fool would wake up and spend any time, wasting time reading the New York Times.
The best thing about the New York Times, Charles, is that every now and then that crazy French guy climbs the building.
Well, for cat lovers, it's cheaper than cat litter.
Right.
That's also true. So then we have the degree to which the good news is that while New York Times is trying to get everybody focused on Trump's a racist, we really are in a place, I think, where in polite conversation, people are beginning to appreciate that this child sex trafficking problem is a serious problem. I remember back in 2016, when the Podesta WikiLeaks came out and the allegations that there's some kind of Pizzagate trafficking thing, and there are other, the Nexium cult, I think, is now established as a trafficking thing,
Right.
and a notion that religions could be engaged in trafficking, and many other organizations could be engaged in trafficking. It has now become a lot more commonplace. But the problem is, we don't yet seem to be doing anything about it. And Congress is, Nancy Pelosi can go on her next junket. I think she was in Ghana and Europe and here and there, the Speaker of the House. And Mitch McConnell, I guess, is recovering from some kind of surgery. But,
Jowl removal.
but I mean, this shouldn't be complicated. If there's anybody in Congress who would officially go online and say, yeah, I'm in favor of child sex trafficking, I think if we should be able to accomplish sensible restructuring of the laws against child sex trafficking, and then increasing the penalties and landing on people who have been involved in this dread operation.
But do they need to change the laws? Isn't it already hugely illegal? They just need to enforce the ones that are already there.
Well, I mean, the penalties should be a lot stricter, I think.
Right.
Then we have this, on the Epstein suicide thing, we have this revelation that certain prison guards are not cooperating in the investigation. Now,
Yeah,
explain that to me.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. I mean, really, I don't think you should have an option of not cooperating. These people are probably making a lot of money when you consider their pensions and benefits. It's not.
What about the payoffs?
Exactly. The garbage bags filled with cash. It's not as if this is, you could get 100 points on your paper and you've gotten 98.6 points and you're just fighting for the last 1.4. I mean, name one aspect of the care and feeding of prisoner Epstein that we would say today was done properly. I mean, he's visiting, he's got an unaccompanied young woman who's supposedly a lawyer visiting his cell, visiting a waiting room that he shouldn't have been in the first place. We have where are the tapes, all these problems. Many people saying it's way, not the way it should be done. And all of a sudden prison guards are not cooperating?
Can I tell you something that I notice about this right away that I just simply do not believe?
What?
So this prison facility, as Mike Moore has told me, was built sometime in the last 10 or 20 years, right? It's relatively new, this MCC. It's saying there's a black and white television in there. I don't believe that. I don't think black and white televisions have been manufactured in the world for a much longer time than this place has been manufactured. I think it would be more difficult and expensive to procure a black and white television than a color television. So I don't believe this diagram. I'd need to see a black and white television. Because remember, TVs are now all flat panel. Black and white was a CRT tube type television. I don't believe that has a black and white television.
No.
Weird.
Well,
small detail, but who knows?
Well, the one thing is for sure, though, that nothing. I mean, this guy was not. He didn't slip on a banana peel and knock down a toddler. I mean, this guy was somebody who I still don't understand why he returned in a private jet from France, because I doubt that he was oblivious to the risks posed by continuing to traffic in children, having been designated a convicted felon child sex trafficker.
There was also an interview with his former bodyguard personal trainer who said that he would regularly receive phone calls saying, hey, the police are coming tomorrow at 8 a.m. So it does seem like somebody was letting him know.
Right. So if we go then, there was a very disturbing story, and not in a very reputable newspaper, but apparently the practice of manufacturing fake evidence is getting very, very advanced.
Oh yes, this is. I watch this channel all the time. They love Bill Hader and Al Pacino and Tom Cruise impersonations. Sorry.
So, but this is scary. You imagine that the security services in this and other countries have access to this sort of technology, and you want to frame somebody, you want leverage against somebody, and you produce something that convinces you that you actually did say something that is, or do something that's incredibly incriminating. I mean, there has to be a way of deciding what is real and what is fake.
Well, and to explain to people what's going on, it's not that evident without the sound. This site is called like Control-Shift-Face or something like that, and the guy is using what's called deep fake technology, where artificial intelligence is used to map one actor's face onto another actor. So when you listen to the sound, when Bill Hader, the comedian, does his Tom Cruise impersonation, the face changes to Tom Cruise. And it's very subtle when you watch it, but you can see it happening right there. Pretty interesting, Charles.
Yeah.
Developed in part by Disney.
Really?
Yes.
So in this whole area of child sex trafficking, we've featured Corey, and this is a link to a number of her, she calls them digs, but extensive investigative reports. She focuses on child sex trafficking, on human trafficking, on many other diabolical activities, on the Clintons and others. She, like you, Jason, is an independent person, but unlike you, is, I think she needs help. I mean, I'm not saying you don't need help, but she's a one-person band, and out there in the wilderness, she's done some very, very good work. Mm-hmm. And I've had the pleasure of speaking to her on occasions. This whole area of child sex trafficking is one in which there are people who are experts, I mean, sadly, real experts in it. I am not one of those people, nor do I want to become one of those people. But here's an estimate that it's a $150 billion industry.
Wow. So people can go to corysdigs.com and read more about that.
Right. And there are others we will, as this story moves along, there are others we will focus upon. But I think Corey's really working hard on this and connecting a lot of very important dots. I've had the pleasure also of working with Katrina Blinova at Sputnik. She's, again, not that one. She's a contributor to Sputnik, so she's not, she's renders her independent views. I first got into being interviewed by her right around the time I was interviewed by Liz Wheeler, almost exactly the same week in May of 2016. And so since then, we have done over 100 stories together where she will interview me, and then she'll put it together with interviews of other people. Here, she somehow managed to make contact with Technofog. You know,
who is that?
As of, no one knows who it is, but Technofog has got some amazing, if you go down this page, you'll see, I think, the Twitter page of it. Yeah, Technofog. So it gets a lot of stuff ahead of the pack, and I don't know how, but it does.
Well, you know what's strange about this, Charles? I was wondering about this because Ghislaine Maxwell was spotted last week sitting at an In-N-Out Burger restaurant that's just a couple steps away from my former home in Los Angeles. And that's really weird to me because she's been named by some of the victims as obviously a co-conspirator, grooming them for various sexual acts, and some have even said that she was involved in sex acts with them. So it's strange that she would just be walking around totally not in fear of either being arrested or killed. It seems like probably there's a lot of people who want to do both of those things to her. And she was reading a book called The Secret Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives. Did you know about this?
I did.
And left a book review on Amazon.
It's wild stuff. And of course there is the outrage, and I haven't had it confirmed, that that unnamed co-conspirators of Epstein were absolved of their crimes in the non-prosecution agreement in 2008. And was she one of them?
She certainly seems to have the calm of someone who's been absolved.
Right. Now, we're going to talk just quickly about a few non-Epstein related stories. The situation in Hong Kong right now, literally right now, it's probably 3 in the morning out over there, is dire. And I actually think everyone says that Trump doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to tank the global economy. I actually think this is genius because the capital there's a lot of financial capital in Hong Kong. There are a lot of investors watching what's going on in Hong Kong. And investors who might have been thinking about putting fresh capital into, let's say, mainland China, into Shanghai or elsewhere, are looking at this, and if they're smart, they're saying, my God, if they would do this sort of stuff to their own people, what are they going to do to outsiders like me from Germany or America or France or whatever? Maybe I shouldn't put money inside China.
Right.
And it's not as if China has a tremendous amount of financial capital. They don't. They only re-entered the capitalist world after over a century out of it after around 1989 in earnest. So they have a lot of financial debt. They have a lot of money that needs to get spent to bring particularly the rural portions of China into the 21st century. Now we have this episode where the world is watching, thanks to the internet, thanks to some of them in the mainstream. And interestingly, you have people who are opponents of Trump making comments that are actually quite helpful in the negotiation with China. So here you have Hillary Clinton. Why am I saying that this is going to be helpful? You're going to like the answer. Chastising the Chinese for possibly stamping on democracy. And the Chinese come back and say, oh yeah, you did a great job in Libya. so that's easy. I mean, Trump doesn't have to do anything, and he simultaneously makes his point against China and has China make points against his opponent. So that's a pretty good deal.
And Charles, isn't there some famous Sun Tzu saying, while we're on the topic of China, that you, as Mr. Trump is, should step out of the way while your enemy is busy making mistakes?
Right, exactly. Very good. The art of war. And so I've also had the pleasure, actually, of going on Press TV, which is this thing here, the debate show of Press TV, where they're extremely hostile. The guests I debate typically are very hostile to the United States and to Israel. And this particular guest I debated referred to the United States as the Zionist-controlled government of the United States. I mean,
some of our viewers in the chat do that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, but this is an interesting operation. This is, I think it's independent. It is wildly popular inside Iran. It goes out over YouTube and Facebook and I think other ways. And they appear to have, a studio and a professional host. I never see this person when I'm just looking into a camera.
Remote, yeah.
And I have to, they're very kind to me, these people. They're respectful, but they always assume that I will defend or take the other side of these tough questions, which I do, and I enjoy doing. And it's quite, when you go on the site, I mean, they do a hell of a lot of work. It's not just U.S. related stuff. They're also bashing the UK, and it's interesting. And some of their journalists are very professional. Some of their guests, I wouldn't say, are that impressive.
Oh, well, it takes all kinds, Charles.
I guess. Now, we have polls coming out here that say that Sleepy Joe could beat Donald Trump. And then we have this story.
What kind of poll?
Sleepy Joe gets 30 people. Trump, the fire marshal in Manchester, has confirmed that the stadium he was in, 11,700, and many, many people outside trying to get in. Joe gets 30 people.
Charles, you could get substantially more than 30 people to
I would
come
hope
and
so.
see you. I mean, right now we've got almost 1,600.
Wow. But I mean, it's just, if you're sitting there, it's kind of like you're 76 years old or 77 years old as Biden. He might have another 10 years, maybe 15 years, maybe.
To live.
Right?
Yeah, but he's already drooling on himself.
Right, no, he lost one son, right?
That's
He's got the second son is a maniac. He's being sued. He married some new person, but meanwhile he's being sued by somebody else for child support.
But the new person was his brother's wife.
No.
Biden? Didn't he marry his brother's wife?
I don't know that I thought he broke up with his brother's wife.
Yeah.
And
sorry. He was just having sex with her. He
right,
didn't marry.
Exactly.
That's okay.
So you got this, and you got falling down sleepy, dopey, creepy Joe, touching and all these people inappropriately. And it's only August of 2019. I mean, it's a grueling exercise to go through the primaries, to face off. I mean, some of these opponents will not be difficult, but why at his age would he think that this is a wise thing? It's not like, Barack Obama and Michelle are saying, run, Joe, you got to do this. You're our only hope. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, they're not doing that. I mean, Obama has withheld his endorsement. They're floating these stories that Joe doesn't have to do this.
Obama said that?
Yeah, yeah. That
Wow.
you don't have to do this, supposedly in March or April. You really don't have to put yourselves to this aggravation. That doesn't sound like somebody who's saying, you know what, I think you're the best person for the job. Only you. It's not a very helpful endorsement.
No.
And then you look across the frame of the rest of these people. I mean, there are, I'm not going to describe them too much, but there are a collection of misfits around Washington Square Park in New York, to put it in quotes. And Washington Square Park used to be open all night years ago. Now it closes at midnight.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. And so these and they're the police actually enforcing it. So the misfits fan out. And there are lots of places that you could sleep under, you know, under this place and that place or whatever place. You could take 10 randomly selected misfits
Yeah.
and put them into these debates, and probably 5 of them would do a lot better job than the other, you know, most of the people in this Democrat crowd.
Actually, I think Kamala Harris would do better selling weed in Washington Square Park than she did at the debate.
Exactly. But we have this YouTube thing. I think that's the Trump rally. This is Justice.
Oh yeah, Judge Janine. A lot of people were emailing me about this, Charles. They wanted you to talk about this.
Yeah, but you know, so this has 2.9 million views. And a little known fact, if you go down it a little bit, this is, I might have been on this show, but this is August 14th, 2016. This is an old show.
Wow.
But this is 2.9 million views. It's a hell of a lot of views.
Yep.
For a Fox video, which also is in the Fox archive, right? So to have it on YouTube in addition, and they've been at this for a while. Only, what is it, 7.6 thousand comments?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, Janine, of all the people at Fox, she has been consistently, hammering this, on topic, on point, indefatigable, and frankly, she's kept a level head through it all. And people forget, not only was she a judge, she was the district attorney in Westchester County. There was a lot of bad crap goes on and she's actually one of America's foremost original anti-child sex trafficking, anti-predator figures in the field of justice in America. So she's written books about it, seminal decisions. She's quite something.
That hulking ex-cop who might have strangled Epstein was from Westchester County.
And she mentioned last night that she knows him. I mean, that guy is. He's a bad dude.
Yeah, he's a cop involved in a cocaine trafficking ring and killing drug dealers and burying them at his house.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's a bad guess.
Yeah.
So here we have, though, you may have been so busy, Jason, you might not know that there's been a new contender who's going to dominate the Democratic field.
What are you talking about?
Right here.
Meanwhile, a surprise contender. All right, it's opening all over the place here.
Sorry.
No, not your fault. I don't understand what's going on, but there we go. Okay. Behold, 6-year-old saying we don't. Okay. 6-year-old running. Surges. There we go.
Good artwork.
Yeah, not bad. They should have gotten that mini AOC.
She got taken down, I think, or something.
No, I think what happened was she started getting threats, so her family took her down. It's a big risk when you put your kids out on social media. You know, we were talking before about predators. A very old friend of mine has a kid who's now in her teens and has a modeling career. When she was 12 or 13, got her first cell phone, her parents discovered kind of well into this process that somebody had been imitating some Disney star and messaging this young girl, trying to lure her to a location to meet this Disney kid, but obviously it was a predator. Nothing happened, but you were talking about online and kids getting online. Right. It's a treacherous world.
Right. Yeah, it really is. And, parents ordinarily, parents in an intact family have the best, in theory, have the best interests of their children at heart. Do bureaucrats? And the answer is they don't. You know, they could say they don't, but they probably don't. So actually, we're going to be joined by Liz Wheeler in a few minutes. Maybe we could just segue a little bit. I don't want to leave this in the middle of the slide.
Sure. Well, she's expecting us in 10 minutes.
Well, let's see if I can get through it quickly then. All right. So let's not pull up this first link. Our friend Clarice Feldman is the author of the first link, and she's basically a Department of Justice veteran and a lawyer and a very level-headed, good person who has said that she's inclined to accept this idea that it's suicide. Now, maybe she didn't give enough attention to the issue, but there are a lot of people like her, fair-minded people, who may come down and say stuff like that. You may hear that in the coming days, weeks, and months. On the other hand, last night, again, this I do want to put up, this Judge Janine, people need to watch this show last night. She was on fire. And I watched her, and then she had Dan Bongino on, and I watched a little bit of that. But this is a very good open, and she just takes apart. Now this one only has 53,000 views in contrast. She just takes apart the arguments that this is settled science, that it's suicide. She brings on an expert and she makes the point that she successfully actually did take a case where it was ruled suicide and she got it to wrongful death or whatever. So it's not uncommon to challenge these issues.
It's an interesting point, Charles, because even if Epstein did commit suicide in that jail cell, I have a feeling a smart lawyer could prove that it was wrongful death and hold the Department of Justice or the Bureau of Prisons responsible, because even if it was, and I've seen this hyoid bone where it's located, it's not 100% that that's strangulation versus hanging. It's like 2/3 versus 1/3. So it does leave a margin of possibility. But the fact is, even if the guy did kill himself, the purpose of those guards was to make sure he stays alive until he gets to the trial.
Right.
They failed.
Totally. So if we go back in though, so she's not convinced. And then we have this story, I don't know if you saw this because it just came out. Apparently, while Epstein was in the Palm Beach prison, he had tiny, small-sized women's panties delivered to him while he was in his original prison
Sounds normal.
Sentence. It's ridiculous. I mean, what the hell is going on with the Palm Beach police? I know there's this.
He bought them?
Yeah, I don't know how he accomplished that.
What's he going to do with that?
I don't know. Yeah, well, he had visitors. I mean, he was.
But he also wasn't in that jail. He would leave every day, right?
Yeah.
So why does he need panties in the jail if he's able to go home and go to his office? You could just swim in panties at the office and then go to jail.
I have no idea.
It's just everything that comes out about this is more and more bizarre.
And Barr has really got to set the record straight here that there should not be one set of rules for the very rich in Palm Beach that can commit diabolical offenses and then just skate and get this kind of treatment. The record has to be exposed and then changed.
People in the comments are saying the suspect is dead, so the case is essentially closed.
The criminal case against Epstein is closed, against co-conspirators is not closed, and the civil lawsuits are mounting.
Right.
And they're going to be massive.
It definitely seems to stymie the investigation that he's dead.
So we don't have to hit this link, Jason, we don't have to because we already talked about it, but what was the basis upon which a young woman who was not apparently professionally dressed and may not even have been a lawyer, what was she doing visiting Epstein for 2 hours and meeting with him alone in a meeting room at this MCC prison?
What woman would want to meet with Jeffrey Epstein, whatever age she is?
I know, a dumb one, very dumb one. So then we have the question of Ghislaine Maxwell and her role. This Daily Peace link is worth hitting. And there's a long story. People can read it later, but we've talked about how she is the daughter of a very controversial man, Robert Maxwell, and Robert Maxwell was from what is now the Czech Republic, I believe. His brother as well is highly questionable. And there's a lot to her ancestry and her family ties that needs to be explored and explained. And not least of which is what self-respecting woman would date Jeffrey Epstein and then move from that to procuring people to join in these sexcapades and then allegedly groom and sleep with some of these underage women and then think she can get away with that. Why would she think she can get away with that?
Why is she at In-N-Out Burger?
Exactly. She should be in,
hiding out, not In-N-Out. I mean, I don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't it seem like the CIA, the Mossad, anybody who knows Bill Clinton probably wants to kill that lady and the FBI wants to arrest her? She's just chowing animal-style burger and chili fries without a care in the world.
Yeah, and then also we have the same issue, similar concerns about Prince Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
And, the English are expert, particularly the royal family, because so many of them are screw-ups, are experts at in trying to intimidate media to not talk about things and give these people a chance. But I don't think we're at a place in our relationship with the UK, particularly under Donald Trump, that we're going to cut the UK a lot of slack right now. I mean, we got rid of the monarchy, or at least the role of the monarchy in this country by 1782. And while people liked, there's certain amusing aspects to a monarchy, and the British monarchy, and the history of Britain, and all that. Getting involved the way Prince Andrew seems to have gotten involved over many years with this creep Epstein, and then Epstein's likely use of his contact with Prince Andrew to build up his image and maybe attract other criminals and extend the conspiracy. This is not something that you let off the hook in my mind. I mean, it used to be that the nobles had noblesse oblige. They thought of themselves that they were sort of a higher, more moral group of people, and they would bend backwards to try to do right by people, and of course there were crooked ones as well. But this guy and his connection to Epstein and other connections of other very powerful, famous people to Epstein, we need to go through a laundry list of all that and put it into a comprehensive timeline. How did this happen? Who was making these connections? What did Prince Andrew actually think about Epstein, if anything? I mean, he should be interviewed under oath.
Yeah, well, I'm also curious to know what was going on with Prince Andrew relative to 9/11, because Fergie was in the building. He's married to Fergie, right?
No, he was. He's not.
Right. So he was in 2001, and she was in the building. And it kind of seems like if you're a royal, getting divorced is way more difficult than just killing your wife if you don't like her, and putting her in that building could have been a way to do that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
David Hawkins speaks about that.
Good. Well, we've got about 3 minutes here, so I want to rush through this balance of this slide, so I don't want to leave people in the middle here. Basically, there's a long story here. We won't bring the link up. People can leave it about whether this whole Epstein suicide was or the story that's being sold there and the Russian hoax were both psyops, psychological operations. And I know that you do a lot of work in that area. Let the viewers think about that. But public opinion is definitely, last week it was definitely only a conspiracy theorist would care about the facts, the evidence, the motivations, or whatever.
Right.
You just take it from us that everything's under control.
So, Charles, if you are ready, the great Liz Wheeler is ready to join us.
Oh, why don't we bring her in?
We'll bring her in right now. We've got her dialing up. Hello, Liz. How are you?
Hello, I'm good.
We're delighted to have you. I'm just bringing you up on screen here. Can you hear me and Charles?
I can hear you. I have not heard Charles yet.
Hey, Liz. How are you?
Oh, yes, loud and clear. I'm well.
We
Thank
are
you.
live, and thank you so much for joining us, Liz. I think everyone who's watching Crowdsource the Truth is a big fan of the work that you're doing at OAN.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Great. Well, why don't you tell the audience, before we get into your book, which I know our audience would love to know more about this book that you've got, but start by just explaining how you got into journalism and how you came to be doing the marvelous work that you're doing at One America News.
Oh yeah, of course. It's actually kind of a funny story. So I did not originally intend to get into broadcast journalism. I actually originally intended to do speech writing for a politician. I majored in political science in college, Homeland Security, and I was going to do speech writing. But towards the end of my college career, I kind of realized that if you want your words, or if I wanted my words to be said delivered in the way that I wrote them, then I better be the one who says them, because politicians are going to rip them apart. So from there, I had gotten together a group of about 14 young conservatives from around the country, and we self-published actually a little pamphlet with an essay from each of us in there about why we are young conservatives. Not about policy, not about anything like that, just why we chose to be conservative. And from there, I had gone on some speaking gigs and did some publicity relating to that self-published book. But after that, I was wanting to get into politics, not elected office, but into media a little bit more full time. So I had sent an email actually to the CEO of One America News. I had connected with him on LinkedIn, told him about my resume, told him what I could do for him, sent him an email. Didn't hear back from him for 3 months. But then after 3 months, I got an email back from him, and he just very bluntly said, "Call me. I think I have a show for you."
Wow.
1 week later, I was on the air.
Wow. When was that you started?
That was October of 2015, so we're coming up just on the 4-year anniversary of our show in just a month or two.
That's fantastic. And briefly for our audience, I know many people know your show. I've had the pleasure of being on it, and
Yes.
I've enjoyed the experience. But when does the show air? And
Yeah, definitely. So we are every weeknight, Monday through Friday, at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, or do the math for your own time zone.
Right.
You can check your cable providers. So we're on some cable providers. We're on AT&T. We're on DirecTV. You can also get us on Amazon Fire Stick. You can get us on Verizon. We also live stream on One America News Network's Facebook page 24/7. We have a live stream of our news feed on there, so you can catch us on there as long as you become a subscriber to that page. And I think a lot of people are probably familiar. We put little snips, my final point we put on social media after the show every night. But yeah, I encourage people. We're up there for a full hour every night, so tune in.
That's great stuff. Great stuff. Well, tell us about this book.
Oh yeah, let me show you. So this is my pride and joy right now.
Good.
My book. You have it right there on your TV screen. I poured my heart and soul into this book. I'm very proud of this book. The reason that I wrote this book, I want to start there. The reason I wrote this book is because after the show every night, I get dozens of emails, and this is on a regular basis. I get dozens of emails from people saying, "Listen, I agree with what you say. I hear the stories that you're reporting that the mainstream media does not report. I agree with you that the Democrats are a threat to, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness." But people write and say, "What can I do to actually fight back? I don't work in politics. I'm not in the swamp. What can I do as an everyday American besides vote?" And basically, my book is my long form answer to these people. My book, the intention of my book is that once you read this, you feel empowered. You feel deputized to go out and actually be able to help defeat the radical leftist ideology. So I give practical ways that people can do that. How exactly you debunk leftist lies, how you identify when a lie is a lie, how you can go on the counterattack and put them on the defensive, just a handbook, start to finish, of how every person can take part in this fight.
It's so important. And in particular, you're out, I believe, on the West Coast. We're broadcasting here from the center of the financial swamp here in Manhattan. And there are just portions of the country where, I joke about this, a former girlfriend who was in the dressage business, running horses in complex ways, once referred to me as untrainable. And as we broke up, and similarly, there are certain people in political life who are just, you can't convince them. But on the other hand, there's this large middle of people who aren't voting. The large number of people even today are not voting, and people who would be persuadable if you could just convince them that actually a lot of their entire life, their adult life, what they've been told is all wrong.
Right. Well, the thing that I always recommend to people, or make sure that people understand, is that when you're having a debate with a leftist, if that person is, a Democratic strategist on cable news by trade, or worse, a politician, a leftist politician, that individual's mind is unlikely to be changed, right? They're very entrenched in their views. But when you're debating, the purpose of that debate isn't necessarily to convince the person with whom you are debating to change their mind. It is to expose to the people watching that the arguments coming from the other side are based on deceitful rhetoric, just flat out lies, or illogical. So you aren't always going to see in your debate, the fruit of your tactics, but for so many other people watching, that makes a difference. And I think we actually saw that. We saw this this theory sort of play out in the 2016 election, right? Because if you look at the deciding voters, those middle ground voters that you're talking about, especially in my home state of Ohio, actually, they voted for Barack Obama in 2008. They voted again for Barack Obama in 2012, but then they voted for Donald Trump in 2016. So there is this middle ground outside the swamp, outside of Washington, D.C., not on cable news, who are convincible when they hear the facts, when they hear the leftist lies exposed. And that, I think, is it can be for you and me when we're involved in DC, when we're involved in the media. It can be a little hard to remember because we think, oh, these people are so stubborn, they're never going to change their mind. A lot of everyday Americans will.
I agree. Now, in your book, do you talk about college campus issues?
Yeah, definitely. So the book I start out actually talking about California because I live here, but also because it's, I think, one of the best examples of what the left actually wants to do in our country. It's the best illustration of what they want our nation to look like. And so we start out on college campuses in California talking about some of the things that the left is trying to do, how they're trying to assault education. I mean, we all know that they're trying to indoctrinate youth. All societies do that with their education systems, but we expose some of the reasons why they're doing some of the ridiculous stories that we hear about. So we talk about safe spaces. We talk about the pyramid of privilege points. We talk about, their gender theories and what the purpose behind the seemingly absurd type of political correctness, I guess you would call it, on college campuses is. And so that's literally the very first page of the first chapter in the book, is painting a picture of what a college campus would look like 5-6 years down the road if we adopted all of the political correctness that the left would have us adopt.
Wow. So it's a horror. It starts out as a horror chapter then.
Exactly. Well, I say in my book, I say this is hyperbole because it's not real, and it's funny, but it's not funny because while it's not real right now, every hyperbolic example that I use in that first chapter is actually from a policy pushed on a liberal campus. So we had an example of a professor who wasn't even allowed to teach, or a professor who was teaching mathematics who didn't know anything about math. And I said, the reason that this person is a mathematics professor, even though he doesn't know anything about math, is because the hiring committee wasn't allowed to ask him what his qualifications were, because that apparently is, that's some kind of that's a racial microaggression. So that sounds absurd, right? But that's a real thing. There's a college in California who says asking a candidate for a job, if they're qualified, is a racial microaggression. So if we follow this trajectory and apply what they are saying to actual situations, this is what it would look like.
Liz, one of my regular guests talks to me quite a bit about Bernardine Dorn and Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground. They came right out and said, guard your universities. Their movement started as the Democratic Students of America or something like that. Are we seeing their plans come to fruition on college campuses today?
Yeah, definitely, but they didn't invent it. As a matter of fact, we were just talking about this with Inez Felcher from the Independent Women's Forum on my show last week. Actually, the purpose of public schools in general in our country, and this is public elementary schools too, it wasn't initially to provide equal opportunity for all students, whether or not you had the money to go to school or not. That was not the initial purpose of public schools in our country. The initial purpose of public schools was literally to indoctrinate American children into what it means to be an American citizen. So American civics, because it was all new at the time, right? So what it means to embrace a form of self-government, what it means to have limited government, what it means to have individual freedom, what it means to participate with a free press, with your votes, with your lifestyle. The purpose of public schools in our country has always been a form of indoctrination. It's just whether that's used for good or for evil. Conservatives have just absolutely given up. It's the most frustrating thing in the world, given up on fighting back against the radicalization or indoctrination in our public schools from kindergarten all the way through college. We've just sacrificed that battleground completely. And I talk about in my book how critical it is that we fight back against that, because what the left is doing, I don't need to tell you this, is they are forming the next generation of compliant voters who they can fearmonger or guilt or pressure or manipulate into voting for Democrats. And if we don't fight back, we're going to lose that generation.
Yeah, and I think the situation is also very bad in the private schools as well.
Yeah.
And the difference there being that those cost a tremendous amount of money, typically a lot more than a public, either elementary, high school, or university. And a lot of the well-endowed financially institutions, the Harvards, the Yales, et cetera, have so much money that they don't really need to worry about getting more money, and they give lifetime tenure, and they're the ones who, their crazy ideas are the ones that instantly get adopted as being gospel.
Right. Well, President Trump, remember a couple months ago, President Trump signed that executive order. Essentially, he was threatening private universities, not just public universities, with all of their research funding. Because I believe it was after World War II, we gave so much research money to universities, public and private, to try to develop new science, for innovation, for all kinds of good research. But we kept that up perhaps longer than we should and didn't tie it to any stipulations. And so now our taxpayer money is actually going not just to public universities, but to private universities who aren't respecting the rights, the free speech of people with whom they politically disagree. And I think the president, I know he has no enforcement mechanism when it's just an executive order, still a great symbolic gesture, something Congress should take up. But that's something that, again, we conservatives, this should be something that we really, really push, that if even private institutions are engaging in viewpoint discrimination, discriminating against conservatives, indoctrinating students, or any of the above, we should withhold research funding for them, because we all know at universities, funding is king. They're going to do anything to get that funding.
Well, I'm even advocating, given all the work we've done on bad foundations like the Clinton Foundation, many of these private institutions are foundations. And they're supposed to be nonpartisan. They're not supposed to be operations that make the faculty into even richer than they already are. They're supposed to be encouraging free debate, advancement of knowledge. And they're absolutely not doing that. The ones I know about, it's just indoctrination. If you dare raise your hand as a freshman and say, I'm a conservative and I want to talk about Hayek, you could be very sure you're not going to have a 4.0 average by the end of 4 years if you last 4 years.
Well, there were some students at a college in Indiana. I forget which college it was. It might have been the University of Pennsylvania at Indiana or something like that. But this kid, I don't remember what year he was, but he said in class, they were debating, I think it was a biology class or an ethics class, they were debating transgenderism, and he was saying, that there are only two genders, male and female. This is DNA, not a religious belief, it's not a commentary on how we should treat people in our society, but scientifically there are only two genders, and the professor asked him to leave. He was kicked out of the class for the remainder of the semester because he dared to say respectfully, biologically, scientifically, there are only two genders. I mean, this is a school we're talking about. You're supposed to learn, science. You're supposed to learn fact. You're supposed to learn you're supposed to explore other theories, but you're not supposed to be kicked out of class for saying, science says there are only two genders. He couldn't graduate on time, this student, because he needed that credit in order to graduate. He had to go a whole semester longer.
Yeah, it's frankly sad to see the intolerance, on these college campuses. I mean, great ideas often are very controversial. You get lazy, the status quo, you believe that Hillary Clinton's going to win the 2016 election. It's just, why challenge that? Everything she's doing is right. Yeah. And then Donald Trump happens,
Right.
Anyways.
Well, the other thing that I would add to this is, one of the things I talk about in my book when it comes to education isn't just exposing the indoctrination. I think most people are aware that college campuses are used as indoctrination centers, but one of the most serious things when it comes to spreading this, disseminating this, is a lot of people who are, my parents' age or maybe baby boomer age say, just wait till these little liberal snowflakes get to the real world. It's going to be a wake-up call for them when they find out they have no safe spaces and they have no privilege points. But that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is a lot scarier. So this young generation, these millennials who are graduating from these indoctrination centers aren't hitting this wall, aren't getting this wake-up call. What they're doing is they're actually bringing that radically politically correct culture from campus into the workplace. They're exporting that from the artificial bubble of a campus into mainstream culture. They're not hitting a wake-up call. They're actually imposing this on us. And that is why the left is so passionate about continuing this indoctrination. Especially
in social media, in Google, in places that now shape and influence the news. I mean, the intolerance that you see and the ability of these gigantic companies to demonetize viewpoints that they don't want, that seem to be catching fire. I mean, I'm delighted that Donald Trump is and his team are putting intense focus on the excessive monopolistic power that these people have. And you're absolutely right. Those type of companies are peopled with graduates of the indoctrination centers and the safe spaces. And they have their safe spaces.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. One of the things I talk about in my book is how one of the left's tactics is to morph politically correct culture into law. So what they previously just wanted you to be culturally shamed for, they now want to actually codify in statutes in our nation. I think we can see that happening a little bit with big tech. When you talk about viewpoint discrimination, this is not to make a bad pun here, but this is the tipping point. This is the that moment where we decide, or where our society decides, are we going to still be a nation where we engage in free speech and we encourage free speech and we protect free speech even when it offends us? Or are we going to start violating that? Are we going to start codifying that if it hurts my feelings, you aren't even allowed to say it? You will be punished by the law for saying it. And I think big tech is that middle ground where it's morphing what used to be just culture on college campuses slowly and surely into law. And we should be speaking out against this because we don't want that for our nation.
I think they don't even need to change the laws. They just sort of announce things like apparently everybody has the right to be believed. I missed that in the Constitution.
Right. Right, no due process, huh?
Right. So what is the marketing plan for the book? Are you going on a book tour?
Right now, my marketing plan is to talk to as many people about it as I possibly can. So we've been talking about it on my show every night. We've been, talking on the radio to people all over the country. We did a book signing called a live signing. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's a live streaming event online that allows people to tune into that. They can submit questions and buy the book. I sign the books and answer the questions at the same time so that no matter where they're located geographically, they can take part in this. Because as you know, it's not the easiest schedule when you're on air 5 nights a week to travel around the country. Right. So we're just trying to talk to as many people as possible about it.
That's great.
And it looks to me, Liz, like people can get an autographed hardcover copy of the book by going to premiercollectibles.com. The book, of course, is called Tipping Points by Liz Wheeler, and people can order that for just $30, a very reasonable price for a hardcover book.
Yes, indeed, and I would be absolutely happy to sign it for you. If you want the signed copy, you can get it from premiercollectibles.com/Liz. Otherwise, you can get it at Amazon, you can get it online at Barnes & Noble's, you can get it at Barnes & Noble's store, and wherever books are sold, essentially. You can get it. There's also an audio book, which I read myself. If you want to hear 7.5 hours of my voice, that's the thing to get. Or you can get it on your Kindle, you can get it on a CD. Pretty much every format that you can possibly think of or that delivers books, it's on there.
Very interesting. So, now, I guess One America News is headquartered in California, is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we're headquartered in San Diego, California. We then have bureaus in Washington, D.C. and in New York City, but my show shoots out of San Diego.
There's one on-the-air, unscripted suggestion for you is you guys should think about having a Sunday show, because the Sunday shows are that I can't watch the typical Sunday show anymore. Even Fox News, I cannot watch it. It's just not worthwhile. And one of the reasons we do this podcast live at 3 p.m. is it gives us an opportunity, when most people aren't thinking about these sorts of issues, to go and do deep dives into the things that we are concerned about, that then set up discussions for the forthcoming week. You guys would have the ability to do that, far more professionally than we can do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I agree.
I mean,
with what you said.
I'm kidding.
I'll pass it on to the executive team and tell them people are interested in hearing that.
Yeah. Charles has apparently forgotten I'm sitting right here.
No. In that they're a big operation.
I'm joking. It's a fantastic operation, and One American News does a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting to be part of, we call ourselves in a sense a baby network because we've only been on the air for 5 years, but in the space of 5 years, we've gone from being, a network with zero name recognition to being a competitor in this extremely cutthroat, ruthless sphere of cable news. And it's really exciting. It's really fun to be a part of. It's, you know what it's like to be part of something that's more of a small business or a startup versus, some established bureaucracy, some corporation. It's really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, actually, I think that Fox has sort of given you an opportunity by drifting back into the left and by giving prominence to so many people who I think should be working at CNN or MSNBC, but are at Fox. I mean, I watch a lot less of Fox than I used to, just because if I wanted to watch MSNBC, I know how to find MSNBC, and I don't want to do that. So
yeah, I mean, I obviously don't read all of these emails that just come into the website or just are sent into the network, but I would say a pretty hefty portion of them are people who are, former viewers of, all the different cable news networks and are disgruntled about them for any number of reasons, most of which amount to fake news. People don't want to tune in to CNN because they can't count on CNN telling the truth. They don't want to tune into MSNBC because they know the bias. They don't like the rage panels where there's 8 different people with the same viewpoint all yelling about it. They just want to tune in. They also our viewers don't like the networks that talk about one topic for the length of an hour or two. They tune in because they know in our 15-minute blocks every hour, we get more headlines in that amount of time than any other news network does, and they want to tune in to hear the news. If they want to tune in for the opinion, then they tune into my show. Then they tune into the primetime hours, which are opinion. But we provide 21 hours of just straight news. So by the time you get to the opinion shows, you know what's been happening throughout the day.
Yeah. Liz, Gina's joining us in the live chat here, and she asks, why can't we get you, Candace Owens, and Tomi Lahren to be the new squad?
Oh, the new squad is in the opposite of the socialist squad? Listen, I do my best to counter the lies coming from the squad. Actually, I don't know if you guys saw this, but a couple weeks ago, AOC on Twitter actually blocked me because, and I say that partially annoyed because I did enjoy debunking her lies every day. Partially, I'm delighted by it because I used one of the tactics in my book on her when she lied on Twitter, and it bothered her so much that she blocked me. Keep in mind, I was perfectly civil, perfectly respectful, always very polite, nothing personal, but just using one of my rhetorical tactics to debunk her lie caused her to block me.
That's a badge of honor.
It is, in a sense. It is. I mean, it shows really that they're not confident, that the socialist squad, is not confident in their own so-called principles. I put that in quotation marks. They're not confident enough to say, listen, here's what I believe, and here's why I believe it, and here's why the arguments against me are wrong. They can't do that. When I give an argument against them, they just try to silence me.
Yeah. It's amazing. Now, I'm sure you've noticed, perhaps you've talked about it on your show, the contrast between the way in which the Russian hoax was just immediately embraced as a real thing. You couldn't be skeptical. Breathless Rachel Maddow show after Rachel Maddow show about this is going to happen for 2 years of this with government money. We embrace it as the gospel truth, and Mueller says, never mind, no, that didn't happen. And there's no reckoning over the mainstream doing that. But then being told, by the Russians, for example, the Tsarnaev brothers are a threat to you in America. You really should look at them. Being perhaps fed information about, not by the Russians, but by you and me and others about the Clinton Foundation. Does the FBI investigate that? No. We'll just, but we'll spend 2 years on the Russian hoax. I mean, the contrast.
Right, I mean, you want to talk about the real Russian collusion. that you look at the Christopher Steele dossier. I mean, first of all, this was opposition research paid for by Hillary Clinton. She contracted Fusion GPS, which was a firm that did opposition research. They hired a former British intelligence agent. This is a foreign national named Christopher Steele, who sourced his dossier from former Russian government officials, one of whom was very possibly on the U.S. sanctions list. Hillary Clinton paid for information sourced from former Russian government officials. There were just some middlemen in between that. And then that information from former Russian government officials was used as a justification for Obama's FBI and Department of Justice to spy on the Trump campaign. I mean, you want to talk about Russian collusion? That is your Russian collusion.
Absolutely. What about, I'm sure you've talked about this one, about John Podesta and Jewel Unlimited, you know, the dirty deal that he and his family had on preferred terms, where a new venture was created and the Russian government actually invested serious money into this thing, inflating the value of his holdings and his family's holdings. Journalists don't want to talk about that. That was, you know, the campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton in 2016. This is going on while she's running for office. It's ridiculous.
Right. I mean, if you look at it's not just John Podesta. It's not just Hillary Clinton's campaign. It's so many high-ranking Democrat politicians. You and I talked about, you know, this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, actually. We talked about the Clinton Foundation making so much money on the Uranium One deal, and how exactly the Clinton Foundation got so much money when the deal was between the United States, the State Department, and, you know, a private company. And it's so convoluted, but essentially, if you actually trace back the steps, Bill Clinton was paid off so that his wife could say okay to a deal that benefited the government, and then private citizens benefited from it. It's as convoluted as it sounds, but I mean, there's proof, there's evidence that high-ranking Democrat officials have benefited by making deals with the Russian government. But people like Rachel Maddow, people like CNN, who say it's a threat to our democracy that Donald Trump ever tried to build a building in Moscow, those people don't care about real Russian collusion.
Well, they're untrainable in a bad way.
And well, that's the breakup line, right?
Great, Liz. Well, we're very sensitive for your time, and I know it's probably a beautiful Sunday out there in California. What thoughts do you want to leave our viewers with?
Well, I mean, I hope people do buy this book. Like I said, I'm very proud of it. I wrote this just for the people who listen to your show, who watch my show. My hope is that once you read it, you feel deputized to actually go out and fight the fight. Some of the best feedback that I've gotten so far about this book is that people write to me and say, listen, I feel like I can have this conversation, whether it's on college campuses, whether, you know, it's at the dinner table at Thanksgiving with your liberal relatives. They feel like they've been given some hope that we actually can, as conservatives, defeat the radical left. So I mean, I hope that people buy it. I hope that they enjoy it. I hope that you write to me and tell me what you think. If you do buy it, please leave me a 5-star review on Amazon, because just this morning I noticed that a bunch of leftists are trying to spam my page with 1-star reviews. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I couldn't be prouder of this book.
Well, thanks so much, Liz. Thanks for fighting the way you're fighting. You do wonderful work. It's an honor to be on air with you, and we certainly will encourage our viewers to take a hard look at buying your book, and more to the point, following your suggestions, which we solidly agree with. You know, you're not in the fight if you're just thinking about it. You've got to go and find one persuadable person, engage them, and from that, great things will happen.
Yeah, and if people purchase the book from Amazon.com, perhaps Ghislaine Maxwell can leave a little reader review. But if people want to get it from a retailer that's not controlled by the CIA, the URL again is premiercollectibles.com/Liz. For $30, you're going to get an autographed hardcover book. It's the book-plated edition, so that's, Charles, you've told me these signed first editions are very valuable, and
Absolutely.
People should definitely pick up that book. Liz, can't thank you enough for joining us today. Best of luck with the book, and enjoy the afternoon in San Diego. It's beautiful, undoubtedly.
Thank you both so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
That was great, Charles.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so okay, back to the slide presentation. That was really wonderful to have Liz on.
Yeah.
And thank you for arranging that.
No, my pleasure.
I hope people will purchase her book. And okay, back to the slides.
Good. So I think we were here as we think about the Epstein, go back now into the grim world of Epstein land. The facts are that Epstein and the people around Epstein and people who may have been, blackmailing the people around Epstein and maybe Epstein himself, they created a lot of records. This story just out in Zero Hedge yesterday says that before before information came out about Epstein Island, that a strange $100,000 cement mixer was sent to this island. And maybe bleach bit doesn't work as effectively down there. Maybe they decide they just cover over.
Cement bit?
Yes, you crush everything and cover it in cement, mix it with cement. But there are just so many. This is the kind of the Epstein story and what we know about the Epstein story. And here, your friend Rusty Shackelford references those.
Getting a lot of play. I mean, there's nobody who's done a more extensive investigation of this island than Rusty Shackelford, including the FBI.
Right.
These look like backhoes and things. People were telling me they saw this cement mixing device in this garage. I don't know that I've seen it, but Rusty Shackelford has done quite a lot of flying over the island.
I wonder where he's based, he or she.
Rusty Shackelford?
Yeah.
I guess St. Thomas or somewhere near Little St. James. People were asking about the range, presuming that the drone pilot must be in close proximity. These things typically have an operating range of, over a kilometer, sometimes as far as 1 to 2 miles.
Really?
And the pilot can have a POV operation, meaning you're seeing the point of view of the copter. Sometimes they even have a separate camera for flying it. So there's one person operating the camera gimbal and one person operating the drone. Based on the camera work here, and this is no offense to Rusty Shackelford, I think it's one guy operating the camera and the drone.
Mm-hmm. But you think about this, unless this was all a cash business, and every item that you see there was purchased. Mm-hmm. Where's the receipt? Who installed it? Why were they, where are the plans for all this? Maybe there's no zoning on the island, or maybe there is zoning that applies to the island. But I hope that the reputable, honest members of the FBI are going through this with a fine-tooth comb, and have been for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Rusty Shackelford was over there when the FBI arrived, and they didn't look like they were going through it with very much of a fine-tooth comb. They arrived a month after Epstein was arrested, which would seem to leave an excessive amount of time for spoliation of critical evidence or potentially destruction via cement mixer, or any number of ways. We did an episode last night, Charles, with Fireman John and John Carmen, who both have extensive expertise and experience in EMS work and also law enforcement practices, and they discussed quite a bit about the cement mixer, this unknown, unregistered ambulance there. So that was an interesting episode for people to check out.
And so then we have a contributor to the New York Post basically calling rubbish on the Epstein life story, as we have been doing. I think, we jumped on this a while back, but I don't know who Jonathan Trugman is, whether he's a Post employee or a contributor. But here he's saying, in hindsight, his story had all the telltale signs of a fraud. Yeah, he did.
But is it a fraud, or is it a sheep-dipping operation where an intelligence agency is setting him up to appear to be this? I mean, it's easy in hindsight to say he was a fraud, but I wonder if it's that simple.
Well, it's just, I know from having gone through in my own way, starting out a career in finance, there's a standard way in which you do it. If you want to do what Epstein was saying he was doing, you get a job at the best firm you can find, you get some training, you cut your teeth, you get promoted several times, eventually you become a partner, a real partner, not a limited partner, and in the course of doing this work, it can take 8 to 12 years to get to be a partner.
But he took only 4.
No, he never was a partner. He was a limited partner.
Oh.
It's like saying, I'm a member of the Admirals Club. I can fly the plane, the American Airlines plane. That's a frequent flyer thing. Being a limited partner is
Right.
It's just a question of do they want to
Wasn't he
take
on
him?
the board or something like
Hell
that?
no.
Ah,
Hell no.
but he became a limited partner after only 4 years. That's still pretty fast, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's a different track. It's like saying, Obama is a genius because he was president of the Harvard Law Review. I mean, the Harvard Law Review president is the public business manager of the Law Review. It's not the person who is in charge of the scholarship of the Harvard Law Review, which is an impressive thing. Similarly, the limited partner track it's typically a track. In the old days, there are very few partnerships left, but in the old days, when you wanted to get rid of somebody, you would say, no longer are you a general partner, you're going to become a limited partner. You're going to keep your capital in the firm, but you're not going to get the same rate of return that your general partners get. So it was a technique to raise money for capital-strapped firms. Had he been as I say, a general partner or a managing director in 4 years, that would be a different story. And of course he wasn't. And the guy intimates in the Post story that he was asked to leave Bear Stearns. There are other stories as well that he may have been involved in crooked schemes.
A lot of people ask him to leave places.
Right, exactly. That seems to be, hey, Epstein's here, it's time to go. But in the future, here's an ad people talk about, nothing's going to happen. This is an actual ad from a law firm trying to drum up people to come forward.
Wow.
Like those ads you see on cable TV now after the My Pillow ads about,
Have you been raped by a billionaire? Call now, 1-800.
That's what this is.
Pedos are us. That is just.
Have you used Roundup recently?
Right. Oh gosh.
Yeah. But this is this is just lifted from somewhere. It's just an actual straight up ad.
So the lawyers are experienced in sexual assault, or they're experienced lawyers who are prosecuting
hopefully
sexual assault?
going after people.
This is a poorly written ad, Charles, in my estimation.
Exactly.
You never know what's going on over there.
Yeah. All right. So Barr, I just closed at the bottom of that page by saying, President Trump and William Barr are not going to get a pass on this. It's not like between now and the election of 2020, people are going to say, did Donald Trump get around to doing anything about this Epstein mess? Oh, he's a busy guy, the Middle East, Hong Kong, whatever. No, this is a clear case in Epstein and the people around Epstein of a lot of people living above the law, it would seem engaging in vile and despicable acts and
unthinkable.
And profiting from it.
Yeah.
And you can't say in your hierarchy, you show up, you're thinking about, what am I going to do in the Oval Office on Monday? You can't say, well, this isn't like trying to figure out, whether, I don't know, to reforming the tax code or making sure our budget is in on time or meeting with the distinguished High Commissioner from the government of Netherlands for lunch tomorrow. No, this is something you're going to have to do. And, people like me who would be inclined to support what President Trump has done in the disruption. If he doesn't do anything about this, it's going to be a big issue for me.
Iron Slippers is in the comments here with a much better tagline for those lawyers. They should just advertise the Jeffrey Epstein Roundup and get everybody to call. That was good.
That's very good. So something happened on Friday, which is that the FBI vault dropped, if you see here, let's hit that first thing. It dropped part 1 of the interviews that were held with Bruce Orr.
Yeah.
So this is just focusing right here. Keep it right here. It was originally scheduled to be declassified on December 31st, 2041.
Whoa. Huh.
Okay. But a decision was made on July 23rd, 2019, apparently to declassify.
Wow.
Okay. So here you have it. This is, I guess, 31 or 32 pages. It says at the bottom.
Who decides that, Charles?
I don't know. 34 pages. So there's a lot of good stuff. We're highlighting a few small things because we had Liz coming on. We didn't want this to go forever. We will talk to you in a second about a few small things, but those of you who are interested in seeing what is the way in which the FBI puts their notes together and archives them or whatever, here you've got 34 pages, which shows you, well, it's about 20 pages, or 22 pages of these notes, and it's 12 pages of a crazy-ass story that was planted in the, we'll tell you about it in a second. that was planted to suggest that, of all things, these geniuses, Christopher Steele and others, were suggesting that a Russian gangster tied to government was routing money through Donald Trump through the NRA. This is a 12-page article that they concoct on the subject, which is just right. I wouldn't publish that as fiction, let alone put it in an FBI report. But this just came out on July 23rd. Now let's think about where the declassification occurred on July 23rd. We don't know at what time of day it happened. And we don't know, if you go back into the slide.
Oh yeah, and the 23rd, of course, the same day that Epstein supposedly, that you said, was
right.
found in the cell.
And the reporting is interesting on this. If you hit this link here, the CNBC link, the reporting on when he was found, okay, this originally, CNBC.
Yes, they want, you gotta, it's an ad, but keep going and
okay.
I'll address it.
All right, so the reporting originally on CNBC came out, it's published in the evening of the 24th, and then it's updated again on the 25th. And when you look through the messing about on this topic, you find lots of errors. You have people saying he was found on the 25th, you have people saying he was found on the 24th. I assume we're going to find out that the cameras weren't working on the 23rd and 24th, so we don't really know, and the guards were drunk, and the warden was out partying, and who knows what was really going on. But I do find it interesting that these two things happen on the same day. And many things will happen on the same day, but the decision to resist declassification is a decision that is almost now over a year at this point. People are fighting tooth and nail. Remember the Horowitz report, the first one, they fought that, and then we were going to get the declassified version of whatever's coming next. But we haven't gotten that yet. So multiple powers are desperately afraid of whatever is in this declassified version. And when we think about why that would, what would be matters of national security, they must deal with U.S. relations with foreign powers relations with the U.S., maybe both of our relations outside our respective countries in some third theater. But there's some collection of allies and maybe rivals who are fearful of what is at the center of this root cause, and this root cause of concern. And when I think about the election in 2016, what I believe is going on there is that the insiders, the Obama team and Clinton, knew that they had to rig the primaries and rig the election for fear that Donald Trump or whoever would actually challenge Hillary, would undo all and find out about all these crimes. So this is not just like a simple little thing here. I think the decision to declass might well be tied to the decision to either attack Epstein or pressurize Epstein at the same time. And if we go back into the slide for a second, a very interesting thing that I hadn't focused on until recently is that Bruce Orr was quite a senior level person. He was the Assistant Deputy Attorney General, but most importantly, I put it in italic bold caps, he was director of the Department of Justice Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. Okay, that's rough stuff.
Well, he was organizing all the crime.
Yeah. Well, but you think about it, what this guy must know about, right? If he in theory is doing his job properly. He's at the center of all efforts of the Department of Justice in league with other parties against organized crime. And by that, I take the most vicious organized crime are the Russian monsters. They're apparently legendary for being, brutal, absolutely brutal. And here's a guy who's in theory monitoring all that, and also on top of drug enforcement, so El Chapo and that kind of stuff. And he's a guy, if he's not straight, he's enormously valuable to numerous other parties. And here he's married to this woman who's putting dirt together against Donald Trump.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this, Charles, because I'm learning a lot about discovery and civil lawsuits. And we remember in 2018, just about 1 year ago today, there was this article about Nellie Orr having a FCC ham radio operator's license. There's a lot of people who watch Crowdsource the Truth and make videos about me that have ham radio licenses that might allow them to communicate with other people in a way that would potentially avoid the process of discovery in civil or even criminal investigations. I don't believe there's any records kept of these, ham radio communications.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea, and I was part of a two-career couple. I well understand that, that it's a level of complexity not originally envisaged in the 1950s and the 1960s, particularly in law and banking and politics and stuff like that. So in some ways it's unfair to say that, you have to disclose what your spouse is doing to a government official if you're to the regulators if you're a senior government official.
I think you have privilege with your spouse. You don't have to disclose some stuff.
No, employers I know, like investment banks will say, and governments will say, you can't, be married to somebody who's, let's say, chief of the Gambino crime family and keep your job. That's just not going to work, right? It's like. So,
they had that show, Growing Up Gotti or something like that.
Yeah, Growing Up Clinton.
Right, that's the next show.
Yeah. So out of this revelation here, this drop in the FBI vault, we learn specifically that Orr met Christopher Steele late in 2007, and after then, by early 2009, Steele co-founds this group, Orbis. Now, if we look here, you can see this is the actual link off the web to Orbis today.
This is another one of these private intelligence firms.
Right. Founded in 2009. There you have him, Christopher Steele, director and joint founder focusing on Russia and the CIS, and the other dude focuses on the rest of the world.
Now, I'm not one who should be criticizing this, but I recommend this gentleman select a darker background to be photographed on, or get hair replacement.
You mean Steele?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, this idea, so Orr has known Christopher Steele going way back, and we think back into 2007, there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on back in 2007 and 8, Uranium One run-up, Kazakhstan, a lot of drug issues and other issues, and he's had this long association with Christopher Steele. Now Christopher Steele goes off and co-founds this mini intelligence operation, and I've talked actually to people who knew Steele, and claim, and those people, I don't want to know Steele, but they claim that he was a monumental screw-up. I mean, he was not highly regarded.
Can a ham radio reach England, or what's the range of it?
I doubt it can reach.
Someone will know.
Yeah, I don't think it can reach England, but I think it can. Many people use these ham radios, but I don't think the Associate Deputy Attorney General should be allowed to have a wife working in effect with Steele and these other people and Fusion GPS and the ham radio, and nobody in the FBI just to say, now wait a minute, that's a little bit odd.
Yeah. Do you have a ham radio, Charles?
No,
me neither.
I like ham
I don't
sandwiches.
Even like ham.
I love it, but especially with Swiss cheese. But anyway, it's the kind of thing where maybe back then first under Mueller and then under Comey was the approach that, well, okay, if you're gonna have a working wife, maybe what you should do is have a toilet bowl server system as well for all your state secrets.
Apparently, ham radios can reach around the world. I was aware that.
Really?
I think FM broadcasts shoot from where they go straight out, and AM broadcasts can kind of go around or something like that. They go into space with radio broadcasts, so.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, okay.
We've got people telling us that they can, so that's interesting.
So, we think, this whole issue with Trump today, I'm trying to draw a contrast between the way Trump has been demonized since, before the election, but immediately when it became apparent that he had won, for attempting a Russian reset, with the way in which Obama was treated. And I came across this very interesting link here, that immediately after Obama won, people were floating, and Biden himself was floating. This is from your favorite operation here, if you hit this link. I know you go there every morning to get your instructions in the Council on Foreign Relations. But but here's a piece that appeared in February 17th, 2009. Obama hasn't been president for a full month yet, and Hillary Clinton hasn't been stealing secrets in her role as Secretary of State for more than 17 days. And here's a piece in the Council on Foreign Relations, talking about the need for a Russian reset, and it was a very delicate set of issues at that time. So it's okay for this incumbent Obama team to be working on that, but it's not okay for Donald Trump after Obama has so abysmally managed relations with Russia as president. It's not okay for Donald Trump to try to fix that, right? Because if he were to try to fix that, he might learn all the many missteps that had happened not only under Obama, but likely under W. Bush and Clinton and others in the attempted management of relations with Russia. We learn through John Solomon's great reporting that the FBI in 2009 and 10 had abundant evidence, and you would assume that perhaps Orr would know about this, or maybe Strzok, that the Russian elements of the Russian government were involved in a bribery and kickback scheme when Barack Obama was president, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, when a lot of Clinton-Obama appointees were nestled into positions around this whole oversight of the Russian relationship. And, it seems to me that if I were the current FBI director, or I were somebody responsible for figuring out what really happened, I'd want to go into these records. I want to understand, what was the FBI doing? Who was supervising the FBI? Where did those people end up afterwards? Are any of them still in government? I'd sit down with them and I'd be asking them tough questions about, how did you let this mess get as bad as it's now gotten? And why do we care about what you have to say? I mean, your expertise apparently is in screwing up things. It's not in getting anything done. So if we continue on back to the slide, I mentioned this before, but I have to keep bringing it up. Chapman was arrested on the 27th of June, 2010. And in multiple reports, there are suggestions that the reason she was arrested then is she was getting very close to compromising a senior cabinet level official in the Obama administration. They did not want to see that happen. So they rounded her up, and I think 9 others or so. And by the 9th of July, 2010, instead of keeping them in prison, dry cleaning them, giving them a chance to understand, just how bad our prisons can be versus their Siberian prisons, and asking
the Epstein cop.
Right, exactly. Next to the Epstein cop, or the female equivalent. Yeah. And instead of doing that, what we decide to do under Obama and under Hillary Clinton, when she's Secretary of State, is to rush these people outside the country into an uneven exchange where roughly 10 of them are exchanged for roughly 4 of ours in a matter of 2.5 weeks, or not even 2 weeks. So that's very suspicious to me. And if Hillary Clinton had been transacting all of her business on government emails, the email traffic in this time frame must be very, very interesting, right? I mean, the roundup, it gets announced, there's got to be a reaction to it. What are the implications of this? Who are these spies? People must be wondering, did you know it? I mean, I met Anna Chapman, I was wondering about it. What the hell? I mean, she just seemed like an attractive person.
Item of wonder.
Right, but it was like, next thing I know, whoa, she's been rounded up, she's a spy. And I have emails, I think, somewhere in my own old email address to people wondering about this. You got to believe that the Secretary of State and her people are back and forth with Obama and others saying, what the hell is going on here? And then how they decided to negotiate 10 of these for 4 of ours. Why do we let them get back 10 and we only got 4?
Anna Chapman's worth 2.5.
Right, exactly, 7. This is a very suspicious set of unanswered questions. Then you have this report here, which you might just hit the link, where people are reporting that at the FBI office again in Boston, remember that's Tsarnaev, Boston, the FBI people by late 2013 were warning that it was dangerous for the Obama administration to allow so many Russian organizations to go to Silicon Valley, to go to the Route 128, et cetera,
Skolkovo,
and in Russia in Skolkovo, to carry on with this project to assist the Russians in creating the equivalent of the Russian equivalent of Silicon Valley. The FBI was warning about that. So if they're going to go public and warn about it, what's in the FBI file? What prompted them to have those warnings? And why weren't those warnings heeded? And wouldn't it be important to understand these warnings and how they may connect to Republican and Democratic donors who may have gotten benefits out of these business deals that did occur starting after January 20th, 2009, when Barack Obama became president of the United States. To me, if you're going to study corruption and crony capitalism, you might want to consider studying corruption and crony capitalism and not, going off on tangents into crazy-ass places where our mainstream press has gone.
You could just call Barack Obama.
Right.
Study that.
Right. And here, this conservative treehouse has a story that Matt Whitaker had just publicly stated recently, but back then he was saying that there are many questions about the Bruce and Nellie or activities. I mean, it's not, and he was the acting attorney general for a while.
It's too bad they didn't make him the full attorney general.
Yeah,
he seemed poised to go and was not tainted by lots of bizarre interactions with H.W. Bush and Iran-Contra.
Yeah, and he also had on his own, when he worked for a foundation, he had targeted the Clinton Foundation. I mean, he understood.
And also, his father is not suspected of possibly hiring Jeffrey Epstein for anything, as far as we know.
That's right. Well, maybe he'll get a new job. I mean, I'd love to see Whitaker in and Ray out.
Oh yeah, make him the director of the FBI. That's a good idea.
I'd love to see that. So we've said it before, but if people haven't seen his rally, Trump's Manchester rally, there's a link to the YouTube for it. And I wasn't actually able to watch more than half an hour of it because there was a lot going on in my life then. But I tend to watch the rest of it. Interesting. Let's see. This version only has 12,000 views.
This looks like it's some official Donald Trump YouTube channel, though, or maybe not. It's got a check. It's hard to know. How could it have only 185,000 people subscribed to it? You'd think Donald Trump would have millions.
It's got to be. Maybe it's the Manchester, maybe it's the New Hampshire organization or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, for people who want to go back over this ground, this is a way you can do it. And I enjoy watching. I think they're spectacles. They've earned already a place in American history as being novel. They're only going to be effective if Donald Trump goes beyond talking to acting on this swamp draining stuff.
Yeah, he's running out of time to do that.
So here we have, and let's not pull up the link in the interest of time, the Vanity Fair piece which alleges that in May of 2015, so just as I was pounding the table on the Clinton Foundation, that Bill Clinton suggests, hey, Donald, you should run for president. And I believe, that Donald Trump may have been persuaded in part that, Bill Clinton's making a point, he knows him, he's met him, it feeds his ego a little bit. And I believe the Clintons thought, at the time, that Donald Trump would be among the easiest to beat. They did not want a professional.
Well, they said that in the emails, right?
Right. So, and then we have this great piece by Catherine Herridge. Again, let's not pull this one up either. People can read it later. Claiming that Stefan Halper is a diabolical guy. I mean, he clearly was. He was on the payroll, I think, of the FBI, making a fair amount of money. And he and others were tasked with setting Flynn up and getting rid of Flynn, basically. And that they were successful in doing. And I don't think this guy should be able to get away with what he's done. I really don't. I think there should be a tough, fair-minded investigation where he's asked questions under oath by empowered investigators, because he has got to be a weak point in the chain of understanding what was really going on here in the plot to get Trumpy.
Did you ever see the Monty Python film, The Meaning of Life?
Of course.
Mr. what is his name? Kriya Shore, who comes into the restaurant and explodes?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what this guy looks like.
Yeah, and Judicial Watch has also been very helpful in getting these 302s. There's a link. I think it's similar to what the FBI Vault just put out, but they're relentless and, as I say, doing good work on on the key elements of this saga, the Clinton Foundation, the email investigation, and other things. So just to go back into the timeline, again, I'm not going to pull up many of these links. We go back to May of 2016. Bill is suggesting to Donald Trump, who has not yet decided to go for it officially, that he ought to run for president. Alana Goodman, who is a great reporter, puts this piece out focusing, and I appreciate it, focusing on my work against the Clinton Foundation, but reminding people that, hey, you know, I got started on this exposing a more complex fraud, General Electric, which, by the way, was in the news last week and will be in the news this week because their stock is now back to $8,
Nice.
which is well down from the 40 when I started on it, in at least recommending a short on August 31st, 2007. So then Liz was kind enough to interview me on the 17th of May. And that got a lot of attention. I mean, this was, you know, Trump had not yet announced. Hillary Clinton, I believe, announced in April of 2016, you know, confirmed that she was going to run. And people finally said, you know, maybe we better look at this Clinton Foundation. Then the 22nd of July, drop a whole bunch of leaks about the DNC. And then here we look at, this is in the latest FBI vault. In late July, it says, possibly Saturday, July 30th, somebody called Orr and asked to meet for breakfast, as he or she, they're trying to hide who it is, had some serious stuff to talk about, okay? So Trump's the likely nominee. The Clinton Foundation thing has been put to bed, or the Clinton email thing has been put to bed by Comey, and now there's a meeting. Somebody is in town from out of town, wants to speak to Orr. Zero Hedge publishes the big piece about the Clinton Foundation, which got a lot of attention, and then on the 8th of September, and then 15 days later, Isikoff publishes a story basically saying that people were studying a company whose offices were based in the New York Trump Tower because there were suspicious communications going from this operation over to Moscow. And when you go into the FBI vault drop, the 302 drops, you see that there were connections, I think, to Orr and various journalists. Orr was being fed this information, and he turns around and feeds it back to the, and it turns out to be all wrong in addition.
I actually called the bank in Moscow that was allegedly communicating somehow, and they sent me a whole long explanation of how it was not what was being reported by Isikoff and all these other guys. It was like nothing.
So then the FBI gets together, and they're aware there are issues. By the 22nd of November 2016, they interview Orr, and it says, Orr believes Russian oligarchs will provide information to the FBI because in Russia, everyone talks to the police.
What?
Well, I think that's probably true. When the police come to your door with their Kalashnikovs.
I think that's true.
Well, I don't know. If they show up, they break down your door and they point a gun down your throat, you might talk, maybe. But the article that I was referring to that was planted, that forms the bulk of this latest FBI vault, is here. This Think Progress link. And it really is, it reads, it's garbage, this article.
Yeah. Isn't this a John Podesta thing, Think Progress?
I don't know. But look, this guy, the title, why has the IRA, you need red meat, so put the IRA in there. NRA rather, been cozying up to Russia. I mean, just the title alone is red meat, sure to get,
Liberal brains exploding.
Right, and this article, in the version that is in the FBI vault, yeah, I mean, this picture, right? And this is this woman.
Look at where she's pointing the gun.
Right, Maria Butina. This is this person. And that's Wayne LaPierre, who's
head of the
NRA.
Now wait a minute, Maria Butina strikes me. Who is she? Was she the head of a Kalashnikov manufacturing factory or something?
No, she's the head of a Russian equivalent of an NRA.
I think I've heard about her.
Oh yeah, she's controversial, but
pretty boozy channel.
Yeah, this article is 12 pages long. Okay, so out of the 34 pages that are in this latest FBI vault drop on part 101 on Bruce Orr, the article is 12 or 13 pages long. So a lot of work went into putting this article out, which comes out, in this crucial period where Hillary and Bill are trying to lead the resistance to Trump, to stop the Electoral College from confirming him, and encourage challengers, and then challenge his legitimacy. I'd like to know exactly how this article came together. How did this person choose? What is this Think Progress operation? Who's funding it? How did this person get this information? How long did it take to write the article? What editors checked it? Is this thing, is Think Progress a foundation? Is it a for-profit operation? Who is the author? It just reeks to me.
It's an American.
Oh yeah, this is John Podesta. Totally apolitical. John Podesta. Give me a break.
Where does it say John Podesta?
Center for American Progress Action Fund.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Right. Yeah. I knew it was Podesta. I've heard about this before. Right. And actually, I hope Liz watches the playback. She'll be pleased to see the graphic of the Podfather when she was talking about Podesta. David Seaman was very angry at me, Charles, because I haven't screamed into the microphone allegations against John Podesta, but I think you and I have been doing our best to bring down the entire machine, including John Podesta.
Yeah. So we can now go to our final slide. And I want to, this is going to be a little detail oriented, but people often say to me, Charles, there are no details. These are people who have not read any of the slides or gone to any of the links. Put your head back into 2013, okay? This is Hillary Clinton is on her way out as Secretary of State, okay? Mueller, until September 4th, 2013, is still head of the FBI, okay? And on the 23rd of January, Hillary gives her performance before the House and Senate committees on Benghazi. Of course, at this moment in time, she still has all of her work-related emails, all of her personal emails, and the government doesn't necessarily have them, right? And so certainly the investigators who are going through the charade of asking her questions about what really happened in Benghazi, they had no ability to actually regulate her behavior because she had kept all the incriminating material out of their hands. That, in my mind, is a complete farce. It's a charade. They shouldn't have even held the hearing without having all of her emails, and they didn't have it. Who allowed that to happen?
I mean, again, I think Hillary Clinton, being a lawyer, is very adept at what you need to do to avoid being incriminated.
Well, to me, it's a process thing. You're the President of the United States, scandal-free administration, whatever. Now Congress, legitimate oversight operations. Here's Gerald Nadler saying, I want everything. I want every email and all this kind of stuff on I want a redo on the Mueller investigation. That's his standard for when it's Republican behavior. With the Democrats thinking about what's appropriate for Hillary and Benghazi, it's like, you don't get anything. None of the source material.
Right.
Why should you look at that? That could get her in big trouble.
Charles, Gerald Nadler is another guy who could enter the Mr. Kriya Show lookalike contest. We could run that maybe next week.
Well, so just to show you how ballsy these people, on the very same day that Hillary is lying under oath in Congress, in my view, the International Finance Corporation, which is a part of the World Bank, announces that they're going to make the largest ever investment in a single company, $150 million in common equity, into Laureate.
That's crazy.
A company that paid the Clinton family $17.6 million between May of 2010 and April of 2013, 15 rather, and none of those disclosures, none of those payments, the 17.6 million, all of which should have been disclosed on Clinton Foundation and affiliated charity tax, none of those payments are disclosed. So she's standing up to Congress and she's going to lie about what happened in Benghazi, and at the same time her team's saying, look, she's only going to be here for a few more days. We got to give her loyal friends at Laureate. They couldn't get a public offering off the ground. We got to give them 150 million of schmuck money to buy common equity in a firm that's just blowing up. This Laureate Education is it's loss-making, over-leveraged, doesn't make sense in the first place. Why did the State Department say it's a good idea for the largest ever investment at the time to go into this piece of garbage? And why did nobody say, no, wait a minute, Bill, what are you doing with all this money? Where are you getting all this money from Laureate? Nobody puts these things together back in 2013. Peter Schweitzer picked up on some of it in Clinton cash by April, May 2015. But the mainstream press is still not drilled down into this. And Laureate's interesting because it's financed by a lot of investment firms and banks that all made massive speech payments to both Clintons. Bill after he left the presidency, Hillary after she left Secretary of State, and before she became a candidate for president. And who knows if she's gotten money from these people, or they've gotten this money from 2017 onwards. So on the 1st of February 2013, Hillary leaves the State Department. So she's still got all of her emails, right? Or somebody has them. Somebody has them in Washington, D.C., somebody has them in Chappaqua, and who knows how many foreign governments have them. But she just hangs on to them. She doesn't give them back. People let her walk out the front door, and nobody says, wait a minute, you've had all these records, the entire time you were there, and we kind of like to see what you had. Nobody wakes up and smells the coffee. Mueller's still head of the FBI at this time. On the 7th of March, this entity called Clinton Global Initiative, Inc., decides that it's okay to merge itself into something then called the William J. Clinton Foundation on March 7th, 2013. New Clinton Global Initiative was not a lawfully organized charity. It should not have been merged back into the parent company. The parent company had no authority to control New CGI. The books and records of New CGI was never audited, though it was $20 million a year on average or thereabouts for a number of years. Never audited. Didn't even go through the pretense of trying to audit. Its tax filings were all wrong, and they slapped the two things together on March 7th, 2013. And what's Mueller doing? He's asleep at the switch. Give me more Macallan or whatever he drinks, Chivas or whatever. That should have just jumped off the charts. So what the hell are they doing here, merging this again? Another merger of two non-compliant charities. Then, by the 9th of April 2013, now remember, Hillary, as they like to say in the South, has been fixing to run for president ever since 2007. So you got to believe on her way out the door.
Like 1981.
Right. On her way out the door, she's saying to herself, I'm going to need some money and power. And how do I get that after I can't fly around at government expense anymore? I better, use the Clinton Foundation to get some more Benjamins. So they decide they're going to change the name of the Clinton Foundation from a name suggestive of its original purpose, authorized purpose, which was to house the books and records of Bill Clinton in Little Rock, to the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. That name change should never have been authorized. This is a special type of charity. It's a public charity that is only supposed to serve the public interest, not the Clinton family interest. And to change the name to say, oh, no, it's not Bill's anymore, it's Hillary gets a piece, Chelsea gets a piece, we'll wait for a few more grandchildren, put their names on it too, give Chelsea a chief of staff, give Hillary office space. I mean, that's not what this was supposed to be for. This was supposed to be housing books and records for the two terms of President Bill Clinton in Little Rock in a purpose-built park, and that's it. So Hillary waddles her merry way back into the offices here in New York and elsewhere, and new accountants come up, not BKD, but this other accounting firm by initials MHM. They are asked for some reason to come in and look at this Clinton Health Access Initiative financials for 2011 and 2012, and they take a look. I mean, we don't have their actual work papers, but we take a look at what they've done, and they basically said, whatever you did at BKD, undo that shit, because it's all wrong. Your largest contributor to Clinton Health Access Initiative is Unitaid, the thing we've talked about before in Geneva. Take their revenues and expenses out, because you're not a principal with Unitaid, you're just acting as their agent. So they correct 2011 and 12, but they don't correct the audit for 2010. They don't correct the audit for 2009. And out of all this chatter, as it gets, there was a back and forth and probably people disgruntled up in Boston. New York Times gets word of it somehow, and they write this article on the 13th of August 2013, Unease at the Clinton Foundation over finances and ambition, talking about friction with Magaziner, friction with Doug Bann, concerns over the financial statements. Ordinarily speaking, when the Clinton Foundation was in theory investigated by the crack team of Mueller and Comey, on-crack team of Mueller, Comey, and Rosenstein for 4 years, and they couldn't see the obvious fraud. Mueller's still in as head of the FBI until 4th of September 2013. The New York Times publishes this story, and nobody at the FBI says, no, wait a minute, something's up here.
They can't read, Charles.
I guess. So by the 10th, this is, Comey is now on the job. It's reassuring. He's now the FBI director. They issue, BKD, our friends, or not really friends, our air quote friends at BKD, issue a monumentally deceptive and non-compliant set of papers, which they hold out as being an audit of the parent company, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, which uses, for the largest piece of the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, this HIV/AIDS thing, it uses the incorrect method of accounting that MHM, 28 June 2013, had thrown out the door. It said, no, that's not the way you do it. You're going to do it the way we say you do it. And the subsidiary, this new Chai, typically the way it works is, when an accounting firm is working for the whole thing, or an accounting firm is working for the subsidiary, the whole thing is typically bigger than the subsidiary. And so the bigger an entity is, the more leeway an accountant has to say, well, this problem that you have is not all that material to the consolidated group. It's a problem, but it's not that material, so we're not going to make it an issue. As you shrink down and look at a smaller subsidiary, this Chai thing was, big, about a half of the whole thing. The accountants brought in specially to correct BKD's work, say, no, BKD's work is atrocious. Do it our way. They published results that way. They filed results with regulators that way. And vaunted BKD says, no. We were kicked off of this. We didn't ever bother to actually audit the Clinton Global Initiative. We don't check anything about Alliance for Healthier. None of this stuff do we check, because that's why we were hired, not to check anything. They then go and issue this incredibly deceptive set of financial statements, which I think, along with all of BKD's work, should, with regard to the Clinton Foundation and any piece of the Clinton Foundation, should be revoked forthwith, so that the public understands that you're dealing with a house of cards here. They don't do that. Then, this is interesting. By the 30th of September 2013, the State Department gets an Inspector General. That post had been vacant since the 15th of January 2008. Why is that? Why did George W. Bush say, let's not have an Inspector General in the State Department? And does this have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein's machinations and negotiations on a deferred prosecution agreement? Is it possible that people in the State Department flying around the world, say in places like Belgium and others, were engaged in child sex trafficking?
Why Belgium?
Because there was the Belgian ambassador under Hillary Clinton's reign who was caught in a park with young people.
What about Marc Dutroux? He was in Belgium, wasn't he?
I don't know if that's the same guy.
He's the most infamous Flemish, pedophile ever.
Right. But so the point is, it's extremely, this idea that on the one hand, the Inspector General under Bush and then under Obama and then part of Obama's second term, we're not going to have one of them. At the same time, we're going to let Hillary Clinton operate the toilet bowl server system with devices purchased on eBay. And these are our the State Department is, the Defense Department is also important, but the State Department has purview over our foreign policy and has embassies all over the world, employees all over the world, secrets all over the world. We're going to say, in this time, back in 2008, the world's melting down, problems everywhere. Later, under Obama, we have the Arab Spring, all these other things. Let's not have an Inspector General. Let's not worry about corruption. We got Uranium One, other things. Let's not have any purview into that. And And in that environment, by the 2nd of November 2013, records which were hidden at the time but have been uncovered by people I've been working with show clearly that the family, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton, illegally insisted that the bylaws of the parent Clinton Foundation be changed, and they were changed. And these changed bylaws were filed in places like Georgia and elsewhere belatedly, but not in the original construct in New York, as they should have been. They granted ironclad control to the three Clintons over a public charity. It's strictly forbidden. You know, all this stuff about the Trump Foundation we've been in the past, where, you know, the Attorney General in New York is outraged that the Trump family is giving its own money to a foundation that it's controlling sloppily. Here you have a foundation that is not the Clintons' own money and is all about taking from donors, whether through the foundation or otherwise. And the FBI is like, yeah, no, we won't look at that. You know, we can't look at that because we want the president to be corrupt. Because if the president's corrupt, then, you know, no one will take us to task for whatever we may take on the side, right? So they seized control of the Clinton Foundation. The 15th of November 2013, the parent foundation files yet another set of deceptive IRS returns, manifestly false. You know, the audits are wrong, the entries are wrong. Subsequently, the filing for this period for 2012 and 11 was amended incorrectly on November 15th, 2015. But, you know, so then that's the 15th, that's the parent company. And then on the 21st of November, 6 days later, this thing up in Boston, New Chai, files materially misleading amended returns for 2011 and 10, doesn't file amended audit, and doesn't go back into 2009 or prior years to explain how this New Chai came into operation. I mean, so I can tell you that no credible certified public accountant looking just at 2013 filings that occurred in 2013, just at federal filings, state filings, and foreign filings for the Clinton Foundation, just focusing on that period, 2012, not a single one would come back and say this is legitimate.
How about tigers?
Tigers might. Tigers might, especially if they're, you know, whiskey-laced tiger milk. So, you know, you look at this, and this is not going away. This is the people who are working with the Clinton Foundation now must be anticipating that they have to file they may decide to dissolve the thing, but they're going to have to file a return by November 15th, 2019 concerning 2018. This is the 172nd video, now 2 hours on average or longer, that we have devoted ourselves to sharing with you, showing elements of this fraud. So the FBI doesn't have an excuse of saying, you know, we didn't see anything, or nobody in the public saw anything. The average one of these videos gets 10,000 views in the first 24 hours, and thank you for that. And we see in the pattern of other FBI vault drops that, generally speaking, when there is a media presentation alleging serious fraud, somebody in the FBI says, yeah, I think I'll take a look at that. But not with this.
There's plenty of stuff that the FBI doesn't look at. You know, Fireman John called Mr. Biazzi, who is the public information officer for the Department of Justice in the Southern District of New York, and told him about the Rusty Shackelford YouTube channel flying drones over Epstein Island, and he hadn't heard of it. And apparently the FBI agents inside Epstein's house were surprised to see the drone out the window. Guys got more information and evidence than the FBI. Now, Charles, when you were talking about Hillary's Chappaqua server, I took the liberty of sharing with our viewers this segment of you visiting Madam Secretary and inquiring about the server. It's interesting because when I first searched on YouTube, I put Charles Ortel, Mrs. Bill. You'd expect this video to be the most relevant item returned for that search. Not the case. I couldn't find it.
Really?
I had to go to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel and search within the channel. So we're building more and more evidence that YouTube is making its best effort to suppress the information that Crowdsource the Truth wants to bring people, even when it's a funny, animated CGI video of Hillary Clinton's laptop exploding with a picture of Barry Goldwater looking on, instructing her to keep her mouth shut, which seems to be the #1 thing that these guys do. But people can watch that video, and really the most important thing I want to remind people about is that the show can't continue if we rely on YouTube to monetize videos through ads. I'm not doing that. They won't let me do it, and they won't even direct people to the videos if I don't do it. So the best thing for people to do if they enjoy Crowdsource the Truth and they want the show to be coming back every week is to become a sponsor on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And the added benefit is that you're going to get access to a lot of exclusive content, new videos every week that are only available to the sponsors. So please go over there now and join us. Charles, it's been an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for inviting Liz Wheeler on. She is a really impressive journalist, impressive presenter, and now author, so people can purchase that book. And I want to thank everybody for watching. It's been quite a week. It's like nonstop Epstein information, and we still don't know what's going on.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Let's have an even better week ahead.
Absolutely. All right. See everybody tomorrow. Thanks for watching.